So today, we're going to dive into this idea called social pollution. Think of it as a mental toolkit, a way to build a filter against the absolute flood of information and, yeah, misinformation that we're all swimming in every single day.
But right off the bat, we've got to ask a really important question. Is our gut feeling, our common sense, is it really enough to get us through this complex world? Well, the guide we're looking at today argues pretty convincingly that it's just not. In fact, relying on it can be super misleading and create the perfect soil for bad ideas to grow. Okay, so take a look at this. These are just a few common sense ideas that feel true, but are actually wrong. You think you can't get a sunburn on a cloudy day? Oh, you absolutely can. UV rays don't care about clouds. Convinced that expensive wine is always better? Blind taste tests prove that's often just not the case. And that old saying that renting is throwing money away? Well, when you add up mortgages, taxes, and repairs, sometimes renting is the smarter financial move. This just goes to show our common sense can really let us down.
And that's really the jumping off point for this whole idea of pollution in our ideas. If our intuition isn't a reliable guide, then what are we really dealing with? Well, the source calls it a kind of mental smog, something that just hangs in the air and quietly clouds our judgment without us even noticing. So, what exactly is social pollution? Well, the definition is pretty straightforward. It's the mental version of smog. It's all the bad ideas, the weak arguments, the misinformation that's just floating around out there. And just like real pollution, it's subtle. It irritates the mind a little bit at a time, and that damage really adds up.
So, how do we spot it? How do we see the smog? The guide gives us this really handy four-part filter. A bad idea usually does one of these things. It goes against basic facts, its logic is just totally broken, it's impossible to actually prove or disprove, or it causes real harm for no good reason. This is our first tool for spotting that pollution before we breathe it in. Okay, so where is all this stuff coming from? If we can figure out where the factories are that are pumping out this mental smog, we have a much better shot at protecting ourselves from it.
First up, the mass media. Look, the internet, TV, radio, they can be amazing. But often, their business is attention. They need eyeballs. And sometimes, the easiest way to get them is with wild conspiracy theories or junk science that pollutes the whole information environment.
And then, of course, there's politics. It's an arena where winning is everything. And let's be honest, the best way to win votes isn't always with sound logic. It's often with emotional appeals or facts that are, let's say, a bit shaky, all designed to get a reaction. Religion can also be a source. Now, it provides meaning and community for billions of people, but the source material we're looking at points out that sometimes certain religious teachings can promote ideas that clash with scientific facts or with broadly shared human values. And this is where it gets really tricky, because even the sources we trust the most, our schools, our families, can, without even meaning to, pass down outdated information, their own biases, or just simple explanations for complex things that end up polluting our thinking from a really young age. So we know what social pollution is and where it's coming from, but how does it actually get inside our heads? Well, the truth is, our own minds are kind of built with these little backdoors, these psychological glitches that bad ideas are perfectly designed to sneak through. The first vulnerability is a huge one: confirmation bias. Basically, our brains love being right. So we naturally look for information that confirms what we already think, and we tend to just ignore anything that challenges us. It's like having a bouncer at the nightclub of your mind who only lets in ideas that are already on the guest list. So what happens when a challenging idea does sneak past that bouncer? We feel what's called cognitive dissonance. It's that physically uncomfortable feeling you get when a new fact clashes with a core belief. And instead of changing our belief, a lot of the time we just do these mental gymnastics to invent some flimsy excuse to stick with our original idea. It just makes the discomfort go away. This quote from the guide just nails how our emotions can totally hijack our sense of logic. You hear one vivid, terrifying story, and it completely rewires your perception of risk. The emotional punch of that story makes that one danger feel way, way more common than the cold, hard statistics say it actually is. Now, what if this process wasn't just an accident? What if there was a whole industry built to deliberately exploit these glitches in our thinking? The source calls this the outrage industry. And its whole business model is basically manufacturing and selling fear and anger for profit. And this industry works on both sides of the aisle. The source material notes that on the left, you'll see a lot of focus on topics like gender, race, and economic inequality. On the right, it's often illegal immigration, gun control, and violent crime. But here's the thing. The topics are different, but the goal is identical, to get you angry, scared, and tuned in. To see how this works in practice, just look at this number. Mass shootings are absolutely horrific tragedies, but they make up less than 1% of all firearm deaths in the US. Yet the sheer amount of media coverage, the outrage, can make it feel like it's the biggest part of the problem, and that totally distorts the conversation around finding real solutions. This bar chart really drives the point home. While the outreach industry is busy yelling about a few specific hot-button issues, a 2023 Pew poll shows what most Americans are actually worried about day to day. Stuff like inflation, the cost of healthcare, and how divided the country is. See the disconnect? There's the manufactured crisis, and then there's reality. So after all that, how do we fight back? This is where we get to the good stuff. This last section is all about building your own mental filter. It's your personal toolkit for spotting nonsense before it gets in your head. All right, tool number 1, you've got to check the foundation of an idea. Before you even get into the facts, ask, are the basic assumptions here even correct? Does this idea go against core values like freedom or justice? And here's a big one. Is the problem they're talking about even a real widespread problem? Next, you got to scrutinize the evidence like a detective. Are they cherry-picking facts to fit their story? Are they leaving out some really important context? Can you draw a straight, logical line from their solution back to the problem? And keep an eye out for big, technical-sounding words being used incorrectly just to sound smart. And finally, you learn to spot the classic tricks of the trade, the manipulation tactics. Is the main argument trying to scare you? Does it lean on vague sources like experts say? And a huge one, does it confuse two things happening at the same time with one thing causing the other? You know, the old rooster crows so the sun rises fallacy. These are all giant red flags. So here's the bottom line. Protecting your mind isn't about building a wall and shutting yourself off. It's about engaging with the world smarter with a better filter. You've got the toolkit now. So the only question left is, what's the first idea you're going to run through it?